When people think of ancient Egypt, they picture pyramids, pharaohs, and golden tombs. But there is a chapter many people never hear. Egypt was once conquered by an African kingdom from the south. Its rulers marched along the Nile and took the throne of the pharaohs. They did not come as servants. They came as kings. This was Kush. And for a time, the rulers of Kush became the pharaohs of Egypt. To understand this story, we must travel south along the Nile. Beyond Egypt's familiar temples and monuments was Nubia. This was not an empty borderland. It was a rich and powerful region with its own history. Nubia had gold. It had warriors. It had trade routes. It had cities shaped by the river and the desert. For centuries, Egypt and Nubia watched each other closely. Sometimes they traded. Sometimes they fought. Sometimes Egypt tried to dominate Nubia. Sometimes Nubia absorbed Egyptian ideas and transformed them. Their relationship was not simple. It was rivalry, exchange, conquest, and admiration all at once. The Nile connected them. The desert protected and separated them. Gold made them valuable. Power made them suspicious. Out of this world rose the kingdom of Kush. Kush was deeply influenced by Egypt. Its rulers honored some Egyptian gods. Its elite used Egyptian symbols. Its kings understood the language of pharaonic power. But Kush was never just a copy. It had its own identity. It had its own royal traditions. It had its own ambitions. And when Egypt weakened, Kush saw the opening. Ancient Egypt was not always united and strong. There were times of division. There were rival rulers. There were foreign pressures. There were moments when the old order looked fragile. In one of those moments, Kush moved north. This was not a raid for treasure. This was a campaign for legitimacy. The kings of Kush believed they could restore order to Egypt. They presented themselves as protectors of ancient traditions. They honored temples. They respected old religious forms. They claimed the role of true pharaohs. That claim was bold. It meant they were not just conquering Egypt. They were becoming Egypt's sacred rulers. The Kushite King Piye was central to this transformation. He marched into Egypt and defeated rival powers. He described his campaign in religious and royal language. To him, victory was not only military. It was moral. It was divine. He believed Egypt had lost its proper order. And he believed Kush could restore it. After Piye came other Kushite rulers. They formed what historians call the 25th Dynasty. This dynasty is sometimes remembered as the age of the Black Pharaohs. That name points to something important. It reminds us that the ancient Nile world was African, diverse, and interconnected. It challenges the narrow way many people imagine ancient history. Egypt was not isolated from Africa. It was part of a larger African world. And Kush was powerful enough to rule it. The Kushite pharaohs did not treat Egypt as a trophy. They invested in temples and religious life. They built and restored monuments. They connected their rule to the deep past. They wanted to show that they were legitimate heirs to pharaonic tradition. This was smart politics. An empire cannot survive by force alone. It also needs symbols. It needs rituals. It needs people to believe the ruler belongs on the throne. The Kushites understood that. They wore the crown of Egypt. They spoke the language of kingship. They used religion to strengthen authority. But their rule came at a dangerous time. Far to the northeast, another power was rising: Assyria. The Assyrian Empire was one of the most fearsome military machines of the ancient world. Its armies were disciplined. Its siege warfare was brutal. Its kings demanded submission. For the Kushite rulers of Egypt, Assyria became the great external threat. The struggle was not just between two armies. It was a fight over the future of Egypt. Would Egypt remain under Kushite rule? Or would it fall under the shadow of Assyrian power? The Kushites resisted. They fought. They tried to defend their position. But Assyria was relentless. Its campaigns pushed into Egypt with devastating force. Eventually, the Kushite pharaohs were driven back south. Their time ruling Egypt came to an end. But the story of Kush did not end there. This is the part many people miss. Kush did not disappear because it lost Egypt. The kingdom continued farther south. Its center shifted. Its culture developed in new ways. Its rulers built pyramids of their own. Its cities remained connected to trade and power. In fact, the land of modern Sudan contains more pyramids than Egypt. Those pyramids stand as a reminder. The Nile's history is bigger than Egypt alone. Kush continued at places like Napata and later Meroe. Meroe became especially important. It was a center of iron production, trade, and royal power. Its location allowed connections with African, Mediterranean, and Red Sea worlds. The kingdom adapted. It changed its art. It changed its language. It developed more independent traditions. This is what strong civilizations do. They borrow. They transform. They survive. Kush had once looked north to Egypt. Later, it built a more distinct identity farther south. That long survival matters. It proves Kush was not only important because it ruled Egypt. It was important because it was a major African civilization in its own right. The story of Kush forces us to rethink ancient history. We often tell the past as if civilization moved in one direction. We imagine Egypt influencing Africa, but not Africa influencing Egypt. Kush breaks that picture. Here was an African kingdom that conquered Egypt. Here were southern kings who became pharaohs. Here was a civilization that both learned from Egypt and ruled over it. That is not a footnote. That is a world-changing story. It also reminds us how memory works. Some civilizations become famous because their monuments are visited by millions. Others fade because their ruins are less known. Egypt became one of history's great symbols. Kush became less familiar to the public. But less familiar does not mean less important. The kings of Kush shaped the Nile. They challenged Egypt. They fought Assyria. They built pyramids. They created a civilization that lasted for centuries. And they left behind evidence of a powerful African past. Imagine standing beside the Nile during the height of Kushite power. To the north lies Egypt, ancient and prestigious. To the south lies Kush, ambitious and rising. Armies march between them. Priests protect sacred temples. Kings claim divine authority. Gold moves through the region. And the throne of Egypt is no longer controlled by Egyptians from the north. It is held by rulers from the south. That image changes everything. It shows that African history is not a side story. It is central to the ancient world. Kush was not hidden because it lacked greatness. It was hidden because many people were never taught to look for it. But once you see it, the map of history expands. Egypt becomes part of a larger Nile civilization. Nubia becomes a center of power. Sudan becomes home to royal pyramids and ancient states. And the pharaohs become more diverse than the popular imagination allows. The kingdom of Kush did what few powers could do. It conquered Egypt. It wore the crown. It defended the Nile against an empire. And even after retreating, it endured. So when we speak of ancient Africa, we should not stop at Egypt. We must look south. We must follow the river. We must remember Kush. Because for a time the kings of Kush were the pharaohs of Egypt. And their story deserves to stand beside the greatest stories of the ancient world. The Kushite achievement also challenges how documentaries often frame Africa. Too many stories begin and end with Egypt. They show the pyramids, then jump to Greece and Rome. But the Nile did not stop at Egypt's southern border. Power, people, goods, and ideas moved both ways. Kush reminds us that Africa was not waiting outside history. Africa was producing states, kings, armies, religions, and architecture. The conquest of Egypt was not an accident. It was the result of centuries of contact and competition. Kush knew Egypt well enough to rule it. And Egypt mattered enough for Kush to claim it. That makes the story even more dramatic. This was not a clash between strangers. It was a struggle between connected worlds. If you want more forgotten chapters of ancient history, subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments if you had heard of Kush before today.